Chapter 8. The purple evening sun had faded in the gray-blue sky. But the night fog had not yet emerged. It was that confusingly quiet moment after dusk. The quiet moment of confusion after dusk. Cessna led a muculin toward the famous female dancer Yuans. The first time I saw her, I was in the middle of a dance. In the past few days, during the rehearsal of the dance drama The Hunter and the Maiden. During the rehearsal process of The Hunter and the Maiden, Cessna had not been able to find the choreographer Alaton King. That the choreographer Alaton King said was missing in her dance, which made her distracted. This disturbed her. Today, Cessna wanted to tell Yuan about this disturbance, hoping to get inspiration from her. For a long time, Yuan's living room had been a place where young intellectuals, artists, and people concerned about the fate of Mongolia could meet. For a long time, Yuan's living room had become a place where young intellectuals, artists, and some university students were concerned about the fate of Mongolia's weekend semi-public gatherings. This was the reason why Cessna brought AMU. She wanted him to make friends here. She wanted him to make some friends here. She intuitively felt that only friends, and male friends at that, could make Amburum change his decision to settle in the south. She intuitively felt that only friends, male friends at that, could make a muculin change his decision to settle in the south. When Cessna and Ambuling arrived, there were already people sitting on the sofas in the living room of Yuan's house. The sofas in the living room were already filled with a dozen guests. Tumun was talking emotionally. About something. The mistress of the house was not in the living room, and the door to the bedroom was also closed. Cessna guessed that this was probably due to Yuan's neurotic headache had struck again. A muculin indifferently glanced into the living room and picked a chair in the corner. Sitting down, Cessna stood quietly behind Ambuling. 200,000 Mongolian iron horsemen then swept the world. Just a few centuries ago, Genghis Khan used his snowy war knife to cut out the north of the Arctic Ocean, west to the Vistula and Danube rivers, south to the Persian Gulf and Indian Ocean to the south, and the west coast of the Pacific Ocean to the east. Tumun spoke in a speech in a chanting psalm-like voice, his slightly pale cheeks appearing as his passion swelled. A blush appeared on his slightly pale cheeks, like a fresh morning light falling on the snow. The epic of Mongolian heroes proves that the war sword of Genghis Khan is sharper than the sword of Julius Caesar and the spear of Qin Shi Huang. The Mongolian warriors who derive their inspiration for life from the bronze sun are sharper than the pale races of the West and the yellow-skinned Han Chinese. However, after only a few centuries, the star of Mongolian destiny fell. The Mongolian glory withered in the wilderness, the Mongolian heroic. Mongolian epics were forgotten by history, and the Mongolian nation became an oblique. The Mongolian people became an obscure existence. One of the main reasons for this is that the Mongolian people did not write their history with their own words and feelings. The Mongolian spirit is not reflected in the poetry and literature written in their own words. The Mongolian spirit, which is strong and beautiful, has not found a green and everlasting form of life in the poetry and literature created with its own words. I am convinced that the fate of Mongolia today is not in the hands of the Mongolian people. Therefore, I confirm that the revival of Mongolia's destiny today must be preceded by the revival of culture. The revival of the Mongolian spirit must be poured out with splashes of blood and tears. The poetry of the Mongolian spirit must be poured out with the splattered blood and tears, and the will of Mongolian emotions must be carved on the sun with the broken white bones. The will belonging to the Mongolian emotions. Cessna gently bit her sweet red butt-shaped lips and focused on listening to Tumun's speech. Although the shadows of the wall lampshade drifted right and fell on her face, her deep black eyes still shone and shimmered with brilliant light. However, she was not so much moved by the content of Tumun's speech. The content of Tumun's speech, but rather the masculine passion in his tone. The passion in Tumun's tone of voice fascinated her. However, at some point, Cessna's gaze often fell unbidden on a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man was sitting on the sofa. Even though the middle-aged man was sitting on the sofa, the man was very tall, well-proportioned, and dashing. At the moment, his beautiful face is covered with an infectious smile. He kept his beautifully defined, thin lips leaning towards the way he looked at the reddened ears of a female painter beside him made it seem as if he was fascinated by her. He seemed to be in the middle of a passionate love affair with a female painter. The middle-aged female painter was dressed up in a very colorful way, and it was obvious that she was surprised by such a beautiful man's open courting of her. Her face flushed like a little girl, and she made from time to time, she let out a few low laughter full of sensual and flirtatious. Although the painter's laughter was not loud, Cessna felt that it sounded as if she had just given birth. The laughter of the artist was not loud, but Cessna felt that it was as harsh as the cry of a hen that had just laid an egg, and it was also very incongruous with the atmosphere of the living room. Cessna slightly frowned and gazed at the middle-aged man angrily, thinking, no, he doesn't like her if he's only doing this to show contempt for Tumun's speech. For, as Cessna noticed, that the middle-aged man kept whispering to the female painter with a slight smile, but his eyes showed a cold and tired. The look in his eyes was one of cold boredom. But why do I always want to gaze at him? Cessna thought again with some trepidation. The middle-aged man, whose name was Yuan Hongbing, was over 40 years old, but he looked young. He was over 40 years old, but he looked very young. 10 years ago, he wrote a book about Yuan Zhao, the current premier of the Inner Mongolian government, who was engaged in the communist movement in Inner Mongolia in the early 1940s. He wrote a novel about the communist movement in Inner Mongolia in the early 1940s. Although he was fully aware that in the early 1940s Yuan Zhao was a minor in the Communist Party in the early 1940s, he nevertheless makes several to make Yuan Zhao appear both wise as a prophet and bold as a warrior. He is as wise as a prophet and as bold as a warrior. Soon after the publication of the novel, Yuan Hongbing was rewarded by Yuan Zhao. He was not only praised by the official propaganda agencies for this. He was not only touted by the official propaganda agencies as a Mongolian writer, but was also appointed as the director of the Cultural Exchange Department of the Inner Mongolian government. He was not only touted as a Mongolian writer by official propaganda agencies, but was also appointed director of the Cultural Exchange Department of the Inner Mongolia government. Yuan Hongbing's wife was a dancer in the Inner Mongolia Song and Dance Troupe. He is a dancer in the Inner Mongolia Opera and Dance Company. Today, he and his wife came to the home of famous dancer Yu Yun to persuade Wu Yun, who is the deputy director of the troupe, to agree to his wife's transfer to his home. To agree to transfer his wife to work in the reception office of the Inner Mongolia Hotel. Work. He wanted to convince his wife to transfer her to the reception office of the Inner Mongolia Hotel because working in the reception office of the hotel would give her frequent access to senior officials. He wanted to establish extensive close relations with these senior officials through his wife. He wanted to establish extensive and close relationships with these senior officials through his wife to create conditions for his promotion. However, to Yuan Hongbing's dismay, today Yu Yun's headache happened to come on today. At the moment, his wife was in the bedroom, talking with Yu Yun, but he had to stay in the living room. He felt uneasy that this was likely to cause a terrible misunderstanding. It seemed that he was also participating in the authorities as a political heresy. Yuan Hongbing's uneasiness grew stronger with the content of Tumun's speech. The uneasiness in Ulaanbaatar grew stronger with the content of Tumun's speech. Tumun's speech would undoubtedly be perceived by the communist political authorities as an incitement to Mongolian nationalist sentiment. Yuan Hongbing did not want to offend these people in the living room. Offend these people does not mean anything to his promotion in the officialdom, and he never wanted to do something meaningless. However, now he felt that he had to say something against Tumun. He felt compelled to say something against Tumun so that even if the authorities knew that he had been present at such gatherings, he would have good reason to. He felt compelled to say something against Tumun so that even if the authorities knew he had been present at such a gathering, he would have a good reason to defend himself. So Ulambakan interrupted Tumun's speech in a careless tone and said, "Wait a minute, the Mongolian history is, after all, associated with aggression and bloodshed. You seem to want to prove that invading others is something to be praised." "No, I don't want to praise aggression," said Tumun impulsively. Stood up, his dark gray, melancholy eyes looking hard and straight at Ulambakan, and said aloud, "Why was Julius Caesar subjected to the worship of the pen, while the Mongol horsemen are regarded merely as a sin? Evil? It is only because the history of Julius Caesar is written by the emotions of Roman civilization. But the history of Genghis Khan is not written by Mongolian. The point is that the history of Genghis Khan was not written by the emotions of the Mongols. The crux of the matter is that the life of political meaning in the course of historical events is the course of historical events is short-lived. It disappears with the historical event and is buried together in time, while the human connotation of historical events has to be created in the process of creating the spiritual image and personality of people. Process of creating the spiritual image of man, the image personality, becomes an evergreen tree that transcends time. I do not praise invasion, but only the will to fly the eagle of destiny that emerges from the epic of Mongolian heroes. The eagle of destiny to fly, I only eulogize for the majestic splendor of the ancient Mongolian brave. I am enchanted by the majestic splendor created by the ancient Mongolian brave men. When you think of the Mongolian Iron Horsemen, chasing the burning wind, surging into the distance, picking the crimson evening sun in the sky with their glittering swords. When you think of the Mongolian horsemen chasing the burning wind, surging into the distance, picking the crimson evening sun with their glittering swords, don't you feel the masculine beauty that does not fade away after 10,000 years? Did you not feel the freedom of the wildflowers? The freedom of the wildflowers in full bloom? The Mongolian war knife that always points to the sky. The Mongolian sword, always pointing to the sky, is the primitive edge of freedom consciousness. I praise the golden beastly personality of the Mongolian epic, forged by the wild and beautiful wildness. I praise the golden beastly personality of the Mongolian epics, forged from the fierce and beautiful wildness. The kind that eclipses the sun, the constant pursuit of the passion to seek a new horizon, the burning exuberance that can make the snow and ice burn, the passion that can. The kind of passion that can make the sun eclipse the new horizon, the kind of passion that can make the ice and snow burn, the kind of will that cannot be broken by lightning, the kind of the heroic spirit that dares to strike the sword of destiny with its chest. These are the humanities of the Mongolian heroic epic. Are the human connotation of the Mongolian heroic epic. The sacred fire of the Mongolian heroic epic is a valuable historical heritage for the beautification of the human spirit. Heritage. Well, I know you have written some poems. You don't have to show off your poetic temperament to me. Ulambakan's pretty. The face showed a tolerant look, and in a quiet and beautiful baritone voice said, but the acerbic content of his words was at odds with his demeanor and vocal. This is the age of science and reason, the age of rockets rising from the sky, computers running at high speed, nuclear fission. The age of scientific reason, the age of power expressed by rockets rising from the sky, by high-speed computers, by nuclear fission. But your poems are only about the wilderness, wildflowers, sunset, and fierce animals. You live in a world that may be beautiful, but has long been. You live in a dream world that may be beautiful, but has long been buried by human civilization. Living in The dream world is pathetic because he will be punished by the reality. Punishment. Head dash, how he looks like Gera. What is this for? What? A painful shriek passed through Cessna's mind, and she finally understood the reason why she could not help but gaze at Yuan. The reason. However, Cessna immediately realized that Yuan only face resembled Gera's in the extreme as soon as she saw his eyes, As soon as she saw his eyes, it was as if the strong and moving masculinity of his face was instantly broken and shattered. Although Yuan's eyes were also confident and gave a sense of wisdom, the depth of that confidence seems to hide something small. The sense of wisdom also seems to have a dark, tight. There was always a dark, tense look flickering sharply in that sense of intelligence. Cessna felt a sudden and inexplicable panic. A face like Gera's. Such eyes on a face that resembled Gera's eyes. Cessna was confused by this. During Yuan's speech, Tumun kept silent, watching him. But the burning melancholy in Tumun's eyes gradually cooled off and appeared cold and sullen. When Yuan's words stopped, Tumun tried his best to restrain his excitement and said, "This pains me. You are a Mongolian, but, in your body, flowing with the blood of snakes, you no longer have the passion that belongs to Mongolia. As I said, mankind has entered the age of scientific rationality, and reality is rational. The so-called passions, especially those that conflict with reason, passion, especially passion that conflicts with reason, is either an outlaw impulse or a child's game. The so-called passions, especially those in conflict with reason, are either desperate impulses or children's games," Yuan said, moving his body so that he sat on the sofa, although he was arguing with Tumun. The argument, but in his heart, he was thinking nervously about if he said the words. Political policeman's ears, you have written many poems, but your poems can only be copied secretly, like a thief. You have written many poems, but your poems can only be copied secretly like a thief, while my book is published openly. What does this mean? What does this mean? It means that your poems are against the rationality of reality. What do you mean by reality? My actions are a reality, my poems constitute reality. Tumun's voice trembled, like a wounded flame. Wounded fire angrily interrupted Yuan, and you only think of licking the asses of Han Chinese communists as reality. Yuan's beautiful face still held an elegant smile. Look, but his eyes flashed with a malicious, grim sulk, but he seemed not to want his anger to be noticed and lowered his. He continued in a calm but pale voice, what Han people, Mongolians, people are people, is to individual existence. People, each person is independent. According to Marx's philosophy of history. According to Marx's philosophy of history, the nation is a concept that is destined to disappear and is disappearing. There is no need to assume that it is bound to disappear according to rational logic. There is no need to be hysterical about something that is bound to disappear according to rational logic. There is no need to be hysterical about something that is bound to disappear according to rational logic. You think you have a passion that belongs to Mongolia, but, unfortunately, your consciousness is just a ghost that crawled out of the grave of history, and your passion can only be the passion of a ghost. No, you are wrong. You are wrong. Cessna suddenly. Her beautiful face became as pale as a snowfield due to the excitement. Became as pale as a snowy plain. However, after she shouted one sentence, she did not know how to express her thoughts, for she had never been interested in politics or philosophy, and, indeed, she was not sure whether she wanted to say that Yuan was wrong or that he was in agreement with Gera. Right, or that his face, which bore a striking resemblance to Gera's, had such eyes. When Cessna realized that Yuan had raised his eyes to hers, she did not know whether she was wrong. When Cessna noticed that Yuan raised his eyes to hers, her beautiful shoulders trembled, and she turned her pale face painfully toward her. She turned her pale face to the side. Cessna felt that she was ashamed to see such a pair of faces, which would not have splendid anger, nor hardness of joy. She was so ashamed, almost to tears. Cessna suddenly had a cruel idea. She wanted to bloody the eyes of Yuan from that face that resembled Gera's. She was horrified that she could have such a cruel idea, but she did want to do it. When Yuan recognized Cessna as the daughter of General Tegas. After that, an embarrassed look appeared on his pretty face for the first time. However, he soon regained his original elegant and dashing slight smile. Although Yuan knew that Tegas was a disgraced general, he was also reluctant to offend the general's daughter. Therefore, he nodded politely to Cessna and said in a conciliatory tone, "I'm sorry." The tone of voice, "Oh, yes, I was wrong. I should not have been in the presence of. I should not deny passion to a young girl, especially one as beautiful as you. You are at the age when you believe in passion. You are at the age when you believe in passion. I, too, as a teenager, had a passion. I think your passion was just the crotch of your pants for that playfulness." Amuculin, who had been sitting in the corner in silence, suddenly, unexpectedly, low and gloomy, said a foul word, and grinned. He knew his smile at this time must be ugly, but he still smiled and added, "Your passion is just that thing in your pants that rises like a beer bottle. The thing in your pants that rises like a beer bottle. Now, it must be like a beer bottle. I bet." The artist suddenly let out a low scream, and her plump, huge ass bounced on the couch and ducked away from Yuan side and ducked away. At the same time, her frightened eyes subconsciously darted from the crotch of his pants. Then there was silence in the living room. Yuan straightened his body on the sofa, his pale face trying hard to look proud and contemptuous, but the cheek twitching muscles, but his look was comical. 2. The door looked at him as if he had unexpectedly heard Amuculin utter a word of truth, and, surprised, he looked at him. Cessna's face, on the other hand, was suddenly flushed by her brother's foul language. Cessna's face suddenly flushed at her brother's foul words, but, looking at Amuculin, who was walking toward the door, her eyes twinkled. Gulen, her eyes shone with bright delight. From Amuculin's foul language, she had a vague feeling that something might make him change his. She could not yet think of what it was. She was not sure what it was. In the silence of the people's complicated expressions, ambling clumsily, he moved his tall body awkwardly and left the living room of the dark clouds. He walked along the silent street, walking slowly in the dark blue night. He felt his footsteps were so heavy as if he was stepping in a foul-smelling mire. He panted heavily, having just been struck by the foul words he had uttered to Ulan. The pleasure he had just felt from saying that dirty word to Ulan Begin flew away from his dark heart like a crow. The pleasure he had just felt from uttering that expletive to Ulan Balkan flew away from his dark mind like a crow. How could I have uttered that? How could I have said that? Amuculin thought numbly, a bitter smile on his face. A bitter smile appeared on his face. In the days since he returned home, Amburum had avoided meeting with. The first thing you need to do is to get a good idea of what you want to do. The first time I saw him, I was able to see him. Today, when Cessna asked him to accompany her to visit the female dancer Wu Yun, he wanted to refuse. But, seeing the begging eyes of Cessna, he could not bear to disappoint her. Just now, in the course of the debate between Tumun and Yuan, although Amuculin had been silent at the beginning, a heavy painful feeling that he could hardly catch his breath. He felt that Ulan-Bagagan's expression of the intention expressed by Ulan-Bagan was ugly and disgusting to him, but that intention was as real as the butcher's knife hanging on the wooden rack of the guillotine, so real that he could not refute it. So real that he could not refute it. Tumon's passion was beautiful, so beautiful that he was heartbreaking, yet as beautiful as a piece of burning years, destined to turn into a sad nothingness. And the icy, dark reason that was frozen in his heart. Cold, the dark reason that seemed to be maliciously forcing him to be like a dog, to stick out his tongue and lick the ugly truth. Perhaps it was to resist this compulsion, Amuculin even surprising himself. The first time I saw him, I said, I've become a dog. Have I become a scoundrel who can only find filth in? I can only find filthy joy in filthy words. Amuculin. Bewildered, his slow-moving figure gradually melted into the night. The first time I saw him, he was in the middle of the night. The famous female dancer Yuyun is 36 years old. Although her beauty is as well known as her dance, she is not yet married. Perhaps, for this reason, rumors of her dalliances with many high-ranking. Perhaps because of this, rumors of her dalliances with many high-ranking officials and artists became widespread in the cities. The rumor of her affair with many high-ranking officials and artists became a widely circulated topic among the city's upper class. It is said that Yuyun's body was said to fascinate men because of its ability to dance during sexual intercourse. It is also said that senior officials held social dances within the bureaucratic circles. It is also said that because senior officials often asked Wu Yun to accompany them when they held social dances within the bureaucratic circle, she became the deputy director of the Inner Mongolia Song and Dance Troupe. No matter what, however, her talent for dancing is undeniable. Today, Yuyun had a recurrence of a neurological headache that was coming on every once in a while. Therefore, she left her guests in the living room and leaned on the pillows herself, lying on the wide carved wooden bed in the bedroom. Only Ulan-Bagan's wife, Narendra, sat in a high-backed chair beside the bed to keep her company. Although Yuyun has already passed the most attractive age of a woman, however, the charm of a young girl is still like a beautiful cloud that does not wither. Like a beautiful cloud that does not fade, floating in her clear eyes, and her physique is still. Her body was still as graceful. At this moment, due to the severe headache she endured, Yuyun's face. Headache, the cloud's face looked a little haggard, and her voice was like a. Her voice is like a haggard wind, fluttering lonely. Woman can only love once. If you love twice, your heart will be torn apart. Love many times, and the heart will be broken. However, I am not sure why, even if it is just. I don't know why, even if it's just a man I've known for a while, a stranger, as soon as he begs me, oh. Those men sometimes get down on their knees and beg me, and I feel like I owe him a debt of love, and only by lying in bed with him can I. The only way to pay that debt was to lie in bed with him. Before doing that, men were so. I think it's a good idea to have a good time, but once they're on my body, the first thing you need to do is to get a good idea of what you are doing. I'm not sure what to do. Listening to the men snoring, I wanted to kill them. Oh, the sound of men snoring is muddy and dirty. I did want to take a knife and slice their chests open and use their blood to cleanse the snoring. Without love, men's sexuality is dirty. Every time I do that with a man, I close my eyes and thought only of my first love. However, that love, too far away, long ago, with the figure of the camel herder, disappeared in the. Yes, I was only 15 years old and had never left my hometown. Never left my hometown, never left the Ordos High. I had never left my hometown and the desolate grassland on the Ordos Plateau. The camel herder came from the sky with the evening sun. The sky, and carried my love to the more distant sky. The camel herder came from the sky in the evening sun and carried my love to the more distant sky. When he left, he didn't look back at me once. Like a wind that could not stay, he went away and disappeared. But every time I wanted to marry someone, his figure would appear before my eyes. The figure in the purple evening sun coming from the wind and dust of the sky was so lonely that I could not bear to leave him. I knew that as long as I married another man, his figure would never return to my heart, but I can't lose that figure. Oh, I can't tell people about my first love, I don't. I dare not mention the camel herder. As soon as I mention him, my heart is like being. I dare not mention the camel herder. The mention of him makes my heart feel like it is being whipped. The words of the dark cloud stopped, and she stretched out her beautiful, white, slender arms that only a dancer can have. Beautiful, white, slender arms, and tugged down the purple velvet covering a painting on the wall next to the bed. Purple velvet covering a painting on the wall next to the bed. Then, in a mournful tone, Cloud said, "This is a mood portrait painted for me by an artist." In the middle of the painting, a naked cloud was shown. Clouds. In a black flame, the dazzling snow-white body of Yuan. Twisted and turned in a graceful and luscious color, the voluptuous. The luscious nipples on the uplifted breasts were as red as the blood of the beast. The lips opened as if they were crying out in mad despair. The look in the painfully widened eyes had a sense of rupture, like clouds torn by. The look in the painfully wide eyes has a sense of rupture, like a cloud of haze torn by the high wind. The background of the painting is a dark gray fog in the background, in which the eyes of countless men appear in a hazy. The male eyes stare at the dark clouds in the black flame. Some of them showed dark, burning lust, some were frozen with cold pleasure, some glittered with jaded passion, and some exuded obscenely. Some show lewd contempt. I like this painting very much, because it paints my destiny. I love this painting because it paints my fate. When I see it, I know how I look in the hearts of men. However, the author of this painting still wants me to sleep with him in return. The clear, desolate gaze of the dark clouds, like a broken. The next morning, I gave him a handkerchief. The next morning, I gave him a handkerchief, with my blood on it. That was the night. The next morning, I gave him a handkerchief with my blood on it, which was the blood flowing from his nipples that he had bitten in the night. Oh, he made. I was a little moved. I thought he understood my heart. He just left. I found that I forgot to bring his oil painting folder, so I chased him out and tried to return it to him. I found that he had forgotten his oil painting folder and went out after him to return it to him. As soon as I pushed open the door, I saw that his face was showing contempt and a disgusted look on his face. Throwing the handkerchief I gave him into the garbage pile. A look of pain swept across the haggard face of Wu Yun and her. A voice suddenly became extraordinarily sad, reminiscent of the ashen wind swaying in the gray feather grass. At that time, he looked back. He looked back, saw me, and smiled at me apologetically. He could still smile at me. Ulanbaghan's wife, Narinyua, has been sitting quietly on the bed. She did not say a word, not even a word. She did not say a word, not even. Did not even let out a sympathetic sigh. However, Yuyun could feel that. Narinyua's silence has a rhythm like a silvery gray wave-like. The rhythm of Narinyua's silence was like a silvery gray wave that was deeply undulating with her words. Gradually, Yuyun felt that her worries were washed away in Narinyua's silvery gray wave-like. Her headache also seemed to be much lessened. Yuyun looked at Narinyua gratefully and said, "It's good that you're here today. Otherwise, I don't know how I should spend this night." Narinyua is almost 20 years younger than Ulanbaghan. Her complexion was particularly white, so white that it had a charming voluptuousness, like the blooming. The hue of wild apricot blossoms, pure, bright eyes looked gentle and quiet, but the depths of the eyes, occasionally gushing a lonely. The eyes are pure, bright eyes look gentle and quiet, but the depths of the eyes, occasionally a lonely sorrow, like a sudden fall of silvery white snow. The woman's eyes are so soft and quiet, but occasionally a lonely sadness comes out of them, like a sudden fall of silvery white snow. What has happened again? Did Ulan Begin has seduced another woman? Oh, did he beat you up again? No, you know I don't care about that as long as I love him is enough, Narendra replied, her voice as soft as the. He wants you to agree to transfer me to the reception of Inner Mongolia. The first thing that I want to do is to get a job in the reception office of the ancient hotel. He said, transferring to where you can often contact people who are big officials can give him some upper-level relations. That I'm not going to be able to do that. But this is not like a beautiful man should have thought. The way the beautiful men have pride, how will let there? What do you think of this? Leave the dance you. How to live? Yuyun looked at Narendra sympathetically, emotionally. Some emotion said. She knew that Narendra was usually so quiet, but her silence is like the remnants of snow in the shadow of the cliff, giving people a white. The feeling of desolation. Only when danced enchantingly, her white face. Only when she dances enchantingly, her white face will spring up with a bright flush, the depths of her eyes that makes. The desolate silence in her eyes, which one cannot bear to look at for a long time, will only burn up in the splendid excitement. The wildflower-like smile bloomed charmingly on her red lips. The smile on her red lips will bloom charmingly, she will come alive in the dance. She will be full of life in her dance. Yuyun often felt as if Narendra was living only for the sake of dancing. The first thing you need to do is to get a good idea of what you are doing. It's nothing, men are ambitious. Narendra whispered for Ulanbegin. Flower whispered in defense of Ulanbegin, and her words broke. The words were cut short. In the silence, Narendra's silent gaze as if gazing at some. Like a tragic sight trembled sharply, she suddenly raised her voice and said painfully, I never want to go against his will, but I can't leave the dance, and I'm always against my. I dance to the same feelings that I had when I started to love him. I can't lose the memory of that. I can't lose the memory of that feeling, otherwise, my heart will dry up. Narendra paused for a moment, looked at Yuyun for help, and then, somewhat timidly and hastily whispered, as long as you do not agree to my transfer away, I will not leave the song and dance troupe, because you are the deputy's head. But you must not let Ulanbegin perceive that this is my mint. Okay, I promise you. Yuyun looked compassionately at Narain. Hua sighed softly and said hopelessly. She suddenly felt that a woman's heart might be more lonely if she had a husband.